right, welcome back to another episode of CRE, The Unspoken Truth. Joined here with my father, Craig, and our CEO. And today our topic is juggling brokerage and dating or marriage. How do you weave brokerage, which is a demanding career, into life with a significant other? And so it's something you've worked on your whole career, obviously, and something I've had a front row seat watching you do. And I want to start early in your career. So let's talk to the younger generation. People are just starting their career. I know you work with young guys on your team. What should they be thinking about as they're dating, maybe before they get married, but as they're dating, but also trying to build a career in brokerage?
Well, I laughed when you were doing the introduction because there is no right answer. I can tell you how we have how I did it, how we are coaching it, how we're training our young guys to do it. But it is very difficult. This is one of the most difficult topics that we'll talk about. And we've had multiple runners that have come in with significant others that have not made it, right? During the running process, they have to make a decision where their partner that they're dating, she or he will put an ultimatum on them, and they'll make the decision whether or not they want to stay in the business, because the business is very demanding. So let's start with what it is first. Brokerage is a business. So when you decide to be a broker, you decide to run your own business. And when you decide to run your own business, the buck stops with you. And so if this commitment is something that you want, then you are making a commitment to be on call, at least early years of your career. When I say early years, let's just say the first decade at a minimum. So for the first 10 years you're in the business, you're going to be on call all the time. You know this yourself, Charlie. Your wife has now got into the residential business, and she's on call. We were at dinner last night. She's taking a call and a text in the middle of dinner because that's what she's running. She's running a little business. So I think the first decision that somebody has to make, and they make it when they're in this business, is that this is going to be something that is all consuming, and it takes, there's no Monday through Friday, Saturdays off, Sundays off. It is a business that takes an inordinate amount of time, focus, and energy. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is the communication that you have to have with your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your partner and significant other. The communication that this is a joint decision, because I was actually a broker when your mom and I got married. And so she knew what she was getting into. I tell the story all the time that our dates were Tracy picking up to-go food and bringing it to Grubb and Ellis, and we would spend a half an hour in the conference room having dinner. That was date night. And she'd leave and I'd go back to work. And so she was very aware of the path that we were on. And I think one of the things I've learned recently that what I think is really profound is David Scholl, who's my brother-in-law, Tracy's brother, had really, when he married Cindy, his wife, he wanted to build a family. He wanted to build a legacy. He wanted to build a business. And so that's the decision and discussion that you want to have with your significant other about this topic.
Yeah, so the buck stops with you, and then it's a joint decision. So let's on that first one. That's something I've had to learn with Siri One Source is like, hey, you're on call, the buck stops with you. There's no one else you can call. And I do think if you're unwilling to make that commitment, you're never gonna really make it in brokerage, right? Like it's always gonna be you're always gonna have a ceiling of mediocre maybe.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. There's a ceiling that you create, and a lot of brokers will work to a certain amount and then say, I'm happy and comfortable in this position. And part of their decision, or a big part of it, will be their time and their commitment after hours, during non-traditional business hours, those kinds of things. And so you're right. You really have to have those conversations, and quite frankly, you have to have those conversations with yourself. I've had thousands of conversations with myself. There I was at the office at midnight, knowing that I had a long run at 3 a.m. and going, all right, is this worth it? And the answer for me was always yes. the answer for most, and some others is not. And so you have to make those decisions.
Yeah. And so the first is buck stops with you. The second one is a joint decision. So as you start dating someone, and I'd be curious how you coach your runners and your younger guys. Is this a conversation they're having, during the dating stage?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It from the very first. It's in fact we coach them on the first from the very first date to have this conversation while you're scheduling the first date. I'm gonna, and I remember Andrew Cheney, who's now married, just had his 10th anniversary, and he's been my partner now almost 22 years. He just had his 10th anniversary last week, and he was in the British Virgin Islands, and he was working. I mean, and he's been in a partner now 22 years. He worked a lot, and I know because it was a joint deal that we're working on. And I reached out to him and I told him, I'm super proud of you because you're still committed to the cause. And so when we go back to the question that you're asking, when we schedule the first date with the first time with the person, we go, look, I can go to dinner from 6 to 6:30 or 6 or 7, and then I have to come back to work. So the very first date, the very first time you're having these conversations, that's what it's about. And if you're committed to that, then the other person gets shocked. I mean, that's always the natural, and then they start thinking about it. And for Tracy, I think the decision was she wanted somebody that was going to provide and be security and take. We have a fairly traditional marriage, and that's exactly what she got. She got somebody who provided, but she also got somebody who worked a ton.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would imagine, so we're talking about dating, and these two, you got to communicate, and it's kind of a joint decision and a commitment that you have to make personally, and then you both have to make as you build a life together. I know this because you say it all the time. There are constant conversations. Now you've been married 30 plus years. You've continued to have this conversation, and you've continued to have to make this commitment yourself and as a couple. Right. So this conversation and this commitment never goes away, right?
It never, and when you say constant, for those listening, constant means all the time. You may have that conversation with yourself 10 times in a week, for multiple weeks on time, for years, for decades. I literally recently had that conversation with myself because I'm at a different stage in my career and I still have it. Hey, is this what I want? And you have to kind of constantly thinking about it all the time. And sometimes people don't, and that's why there's a 75% fail rate in our business at before 5 years. 75% of all brokers are out of the business 5 years or earlier. And the reason is, this is a big reason. One, they can't handle the commitment, or two, they don't want to handle the commitment. And there's no judgment here. It's just a fact of our business.
Yep. So the conversation revolves around, I mean, all this is intertwined: money, time, lifestyle, right? Like, and it's the same conversation with yourself and your partner, but it feels like there other factors that go into that conversation.
I think health,
Sure.
it's also a highly stressful business. So when you add in this conversation you and I were having earlier today, you're committing time, which is in itself is a lot, which takes you away from other things that you can do. You're committing your whole body, and you're into it to win it, and you're in it to win it. So there's stress related with it. It takes away other things in your life. So you're having to abstain from going to parties and going out on and just having a beer with friends. And so all of those things cumulatively affect you. So that's why when I say you're having multiple conversations, one time it might be the conversation at midnight when you're working late. The next time it might be the conversation because your significant other, your partner, she's saying, why can't you sleep in today? And you're like, I got to go work. And she's like, well, you never sleep in, and whatever. That's a separate conversation. And then there's another one where your buddy calls you and says, I got 2 tickets. I just went to the Savannah Banana game, and all my partners said no because they had work to do. And so there's you're constantly having this discussion with yourself and with others about the commitment level that you're making.
Yeah.
And so I think it has to be this risk reward. If you're a broker and you're 10 years in the business and you're making a little bit of money, that's not worth it. There has to be a financial reward and there has to be other rewards that come along with it. And there is if you're good, and there isn't if you're not. And so that's why I think brokers 5 years in kind of realize, hey, I'm going to be a mediocre broker. I might as well, for the amount of money I'm making, I might as well go enjoy the rest of what I'm doing in my life.
Right. So we've talked a lot about how the conversation and the decision stays the same from when you're dating to you're married to later in life. Anything change from when you're dating to married to later in your life? Like, you've been married 30 years, compare that to someone who's dating. What has changed in that conversation or that commitment?
Well, I think the conversation gets more refined. And so if you can get your partner to buy in, and again, Tracy's bought in, but there is also times when she's like, I'm bought in, but I'm not necessarily bought in as much as you are, Craig. And so the conversation gets refined to, and so I push the conversation to a broader conversation. It's like, okay, let's talk about what we really want to do this year, so that I can schedule the time away, so I could schedule family time, so I could do coaching, so I could do all these things. And so as your life changes, and we're going to have another topic on the unspoken truth here on this topic, but as your life changes, your schedule changes, your commitment changes, and therefore how you operate your business changes as well. And so those conversations have to be made up front, and they have to be all the time. I mean, as kids change and grow, they're going to change as well. So I would say, um, and it's the hardest conversation that we've had is when we had enough money to keep going, to keep committing. And so, because now it's like Tracy would say, we have enough. Is it time to slow down? And so I had to do some soul searching. It wasn't always about the money. It was about other things too. And so those things, that's how it, and I'm not being very articulate because this is the new thought, but it is something that you're constantly thinking about all the time in our
Yeah.
business.
Well, I've heard you say this, and this is something you say to Tracy, my mom, best decision you've ever made, or whatever. And I say this to myself, who I marry is going to be the most important decision I make in my life. Would you agree with that? And how has that
Oh
kind of played
yeah,
out in your career?
100%. I mean, your partner has to be your partner,
Yeah.
and that means you're aligned. You're aligned on how you're going to raise your kids. You're aligned on how you're going to live your life. You're aligned on how you're going to spend your money, and you're aligned in our business. You have to be aligned on how we're going to run our brokerage business. One of the most difficult conversations is because I had an opportunity, as you know, I've done fairly well. I had a continual opportunity to have the conversations, because she said, I know these people in your shop are not making the money you are, and yet you're still working more than they are, and you're still committed more than they are, and you're financially secure. And so the conversation has to be really on point with your partner, that says, I understand that, but let me explain where I am mentally, where I am, and what do I want to do, how I'm going to live this, and what we're going to be when we get to a certain age. And so we stumbled through it. We do a better job now with our runners, and I do a better job. Andrew's done a better job with Carolyn, and Greg's done a better job with Kelly, his wife. And hopefully, as Nick dates, he's going to do a better job. He's already had one situation where he was dating somebody who initially said, oh, I love the fact that you're going to work a lot. And then really within 90 days was like, no, you're working too much. And so it didn't work out. But so you have to be aware of all these things.
Yeah. And so I guess the last question before I summarize this is brokerage different? I mean, I feel like a lot of this is applicable to other careers other than the fact that brokerage, at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. You're your own boss. Like, there is an element of time commitment that's driven by clients and deals. And so I'm curious, difference, this topic for brokers versus those maybe in a corporate setting who are kind of climbing the corporate ladder?
Well, the one big difference between brokerage and maybe other positions is that we're in the sales business. So Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, we have client facing time, and that is our limitation to the time. So we are coaching and preaching and getting on our guys all the time that we are client facing 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. So we are absolutely focused on how do we do service delivery, how do we chase new business, how do we cold call during those hours, which means why do we work so many hours? Because everything else that we do, follow-ups, updating our OS deal view, updating OS prospects if you haven't made your calls on it, making sure that you're organized, doing BOVs, doing proposals, uh, getting your desk organized. All of that work is after hours or before hours, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So that means that's a full-time another job. So how are we going to get the other 40 to 50 hours? It's during the evenings and during the weekends.
Yep. Well, awesome. A little bit of dating and marriage advice from a couple of guys here. Um, so it's a good,
show this to your spouse. I'm sure it'll
yeah,
generate a very good
yeah, yeah,
conversation.
yeah, yeah. This will be good. So to recap, right? Whether you're dating or marriage, there's a couple key points. One, the buck stops with you in brokerage, right? You're a sales business, you're client facing, you're running your own business, you're in charge, and you got to make that commitment personally. And then the second piece is you got to make that with your life partner. And life will be better and easier if they're on board and you guys are aligned there. Otherwise, I think it'll be difficult. Money, time, health, lifestyle all goes into this kind of decision and this commitment. And it's always refining, getting refined, whether you make that initial commitment for the first decade, but then life changes. Life is constantly changing. So, um, I think it can be a beautiful thing, and you've seen it, you've said it. It's been a great decision of yours. But it's important to always be talking and be on the same page. Did I miss anything? Anything else you'd add?
No, sounds great. Just remember, brokerage is hard,
Yeah.
and we have to commit to it over and
Yep.
over.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, and
Thanks.
join us next time. Thanks.
Thank you.